Okay, let's dive into this. We usually think of reading as just a basic skill we pick up, right? Kind of like riding a bike or tying our shoes. But actually, it's a literal, physical construction project happening right inside the human mind. Let's look at how the simple act of reading completely reshapes a child's brain, building brand new communication highways and completely altering their neural architecture. To really grasp this construction project, we have to start with a pretty fundamental question. Is reading a natural human evolution, or is it a cultural invention? Well, humans have been speaking for a really long time, but formal written language, that's an incredibly recent cultural invention. We're talking maybe 5,000 years ago, which in evolutionary terms is literally the blink of an eye. And because it's so incredibly new, we aren't just born with a dedicated reading center in our brains. There's no pre-installed hardware for it. Instead, learning to read forces a child's brain to fundamentally and physically restructure itself to pull off this brand new task. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because we don't have that pre-installed reading center, the brain has to get pretty creative. It uses this fascinating process called neural recycling. It literally repurposes evolutionarily older neural terrain, stuff originally meant for recognizing visual symbols, faces, objects, even human limbs, and uses it to process written text. So as a kid starts literacy training, the brain actually recycles some of that terrain. It shifts its focus away from spotting, say, a saber-toothed tiger, and dedicates it entirely to recognizing letters and words. It's wild to think about, but pre-literate symbolic language processing actually sets the neural stage for reading. So how does all this recycled terrain actually work together? Well, the reading brain basically breaks down into three core circuits. First up, we've got the frontal circuit. This one is doing the heavy lifting during early reading. It analyzes the sounds inside words and supports that slow, effortful sounding out phase, the phonological decoding. Next is the parietal circuit. Think of this as the bridge. It connects the sound, the meaning, and the printed word you see on the page. And finally, sitting at the back of the brain is the occipitotemporal circuit. As a child becomes a really skilled, fluent reader, they actually shift away from that effortful front part of the brain and start relying heavily on this posterior circuit for rapid automatic visual word recognition. It's like shifting gears into highway cruising. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that we can actually see the physical infrastructure connecting these circuits. What you're looking at are major white matter tracks in a living human brain, mapped out using diffusion-weighted imaging. Think of these as literal communication highways. That blue tract? That's the arcuate fasciculus, and those green and orange ones represent the inferior longitudinal fasciculus. These are huge bundles of axons carrying vital signals back and forth between the visual, auditory, and language regions of the cortex. And the repetitive behavior of reading consistently strengthens these pathways, basically paving the roads so water diffuses more efficiently through the brain's white matter. And it's not just the white matter highways getting an upgrade here. This neurological construction project also drastically alters the brain's gray matter. Studies actually show a direct correlation between reading abilities, print exposure, and building thicker gray matter cortexes. And this thickening mostly happens in the left hemisphere, specifically right in the language and visual association areas, which makes perfect sense, right? Those are the exact regions you need for a highly functional read-it network. Crucially, this development happens most efficiently during early childhood. That's a period of incredibly high neuroplasticity, where the brain is just primed to mold and adapt. Because this structural foundation is laid down so early, the window for observing and helping out opens way sooner than a lot of people realize. We used to just assume, we'd only spot reading differences when a kid started formal schooling around age 5 or 6. But actually, scratch that. Research now tells us that the developmental trajectories of typical readers and those with reading disabilities can start to diverge as early as 18 months old. 18 months! That really highlights the absolute urgency for early literacy experiences and interventions long before a child even steps foot in a kindergarten classroom. To see what these divergent trajectories actually look like on a biological level, let's compare two brain scans taken during a reading task. If you look at the typical reader, you'll see this bright red activation. But for readers with dyslexia, there's a clear reduction in that engagement. And notice where that difference is. It's specifically in the parietal and occipitotemporal regions. Those are the exact same crucial posterior circuits we just talked about, the ones absolutely necessary for fluent automatic word recognition. The brain just isn't engaging those recycled reading networks in the same way. Okay, so we've looked at microscopic white matter tracks and functional MRI scans. Now let's zoom out. Let's transition from the microscopic inner workings of the brain to the macroscopic, everyday habits that actually shape them. 1,400,000. 1.4 million. That is the staggering word gap that exists by kindergarten for children who are read to daily compared to kids who are never read to. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that gap builds up over time. If a child is never read to, they get 0 extra book words. If they get read to just 1 or 2 times a week, they hear about 70,000 words by age 5. But look what happens with daily reading of just 1 book. That number absolutely skyrockets to roughly 390,000 words by kindergarten. And for kids reading multiple books a day, it pushes right past 1.4 million. You see, everyday conversation is pretty repetitive. Stuff like pass the milk or time for bed. But bedtime reading delivers rich, complex vocabulary. Words like courageous or constellation. Words that everyday conversation completely misses, building a massive vocabulary in the process. But you know, the bedtime story isn't just a giant academic vocabulary lesson. It's actually a deeply biological event. Just the physical closeness of shared reading creates what psychologists call a secure base, which fundamentally aids a child's emotional regulation. And amazingly, this biological benefit is a two-way street. There's a longitudinal study showing that parents who read to their babies at 6 months actually exhibited measurably lower stress levels by the time their child was 18 months old, which, if you've ever parented a toddler, you know is practically a superpower. Plus, reading a physical book in a dimly lit room lets the child's brain naturally release melatonin. It perfectly sets the stage for sleep, entirely bypassing the need for any kind of supplements. And the magic doesn't stop there. Once a child actually gets lost in the story, something profound happens. An incredible study out of Emory University found that reading fiction creates an actual physical manifestation of empathy in the brain. When a child reads or listens to a story, activity spikes in the central sulcus. That's the region responsible for primary sensory motor activity. This means the kid's brain isn't just processing language, it is physically simulating the sensory motor actions of the characters. If the hero is running through a forest, the child's brain is literally firing as if they are running right alongside them. How cool is that? So the crucial point is, because the brain is doing all this heavy lifting, the medium you use to read to your child truly matters at a neurological level. A recent high-density EEG study from Teachers College sharply contrasted print reading with digital screen reading, and they found a definitive print advantage. When kids read printed text, their brains effectively elaborated their representations of text meanings, building much richer and deeper meaning networks. On the flip side, screen reading resulted in shallower processing. The brain actually had to work much harder just to build meaningful connections between concepts when reading off a screen compared to a physical page. Which brings us to our final thought. We've seen how reading thickens the cortex, builds massive white matter highways, bridges the language and visual centers, and literally simulates physical empathy. Every single page turned is a literal building block in the physical architecture of a child's mind. Knowing that the medium shapes the depth of this construction, and knowing the incredible biological power of a shared story, the question we have to ask ourselves is simple. Will you hand them a tablet or a paper book tonight? Thanks for exploring the incredible reading brain with us.